We're on a search for one of the greatest powers ever known.
We are gonna find the progenitor's tech.
Burnham is confronted by her past as she races to save the crew on the next exciting episode of Star Trek Discovery.
And here we go again.
Welcome, friends. We're back at it once again, talking Star Trek Discovery, the 5th and final season, all the way up to episode 4. This one is entitled Shatter Relativity, Year of Hell? Endgame. Before and after all good things? I guess it's called Face the Strange. However, if you're a Voyager time travel episode, you're probably represented in this episode here. There will be spoilers ahead. Consider this your last warning, although I guess that title gag did give you some spoilers anyways. Let's crack on with the show. So I think personally this episode was a definite improvement, a step up from the prior episode. Not that I would call the last episode just utterly terrible. I enjoyed parts of it, but this episode just had a lot more going for it. However, I will give a couple of downs to this episode because there were things I wish it would have done, but for what it did do, viewing it in a vacuum, an episode in and of itself, I think most of what it was trying to accomplish was done very well. So the main premise of this episode is after last time, the Discovery is kind of at a dead end.
Yes, Captain, but every scan I've run, polar and multiphasic ion
Have
trace
all
of...
turned up nothing, not as much as a starbase within 2.5 parsecs of here.
We got no more of the side plot going on with Saru and his diplomacy and the wedding. This was all purely focused on the Discovery, except for one very minor introductory scene where we got to see Locke and Maul
Bag. Is this amateur hour?
getting this temporal bug, this time chronophage, whatever it was called, to kind of incapacitate the Discovery while they jumped ahead in their journey. It just isn't enough of them at this point in the storyline. So what we did see of Locke and Maul, pretty good. We got to see them killing somebody again. I thought that they were supposed to be a little bit more sympathetic, just with kind of a bent on doing what they need to do. This was a little more cold-hearted, but it did appear to be some sort of retribution for what this guy inflicted upon Maul through his actions.
We soak the latinum in faux piano poison. The kind that you sold to the Emerald Chain to use on people like me.
We just don't really know that much about them, and I hope we get to spend a lot more time with them in the future. Otherwise, they're going to possibly feel like a hollow villain or a hollow antagonistic faction by the time we end this. We got to see in this episode a hell of a lot of references and callbacks to past Discovery. So once they're inflicted with this whole temporal shenanigans, they're bouncing through time. Michael and Raynor get to escape the fate, and they get to keep their memories and keep their temporal consciousness, I guess you could call it, because they were beaming at the very initiation of this chronophage thing. It lends a little more benefit to the fact that they're always beaming around the ship instead of walking 5 feet. I am kind of pulling back a little bit on that. I think it makes sense for these people who came from the past to just be so infatuated with this new technology that they're just kind of testing out the shiny new thing. For Raynor to be doing it, a little less genuine, but, you know, again, I'm coming aboard a little bit more on that point. So they're intact, they keep their memories, they're able to kind of work on the situation. And calling back to the whole Stamets.
What can he do?
Well, he lives outside of time because of his tardigrade DNA. Never mind.
All of these components worked fairly well. Seeing the Discovery in different eras of time, pulling out those different uniforms, similar to how Trek has done in the past to delineate between which time frame they're in. All of that was well done. This was very, very similar to a couple of Star Trek episodes we've seen in the past. Very much like Shattered, where Chakotay was moving about the ship to different time periods of Voyager. He was the only one immune. Obviously, he eventually got Janeway involved as well. Also, kind of like, I say Year of Hell, but it's not really Year of Hell. That was just based on the Burnham technology. That's the reference here.
Burnham chronophage. We call them time bugs.
It was a hell of a lot more like the episode Before and After, which also had connections to the Burnham and Year of Hell, where Kes was kind of bouncing backwards in time from the end of her life to her birth, and each time she was able to interact with that time frame, get some vital information for her next jump. So it was kind of like a combination of those. And it was actually fairly clever to have this be a Krenim-designed weapon. It almost seems like they got the idea for this weapon from what happened with Kes in that episode. Not that the Krenim really actually had any access to that, but it seems like that's a logical extrapolation from what happened to her into being weaponized for the Temporal War. So all of the different timescapes and time frames that they were exploring in this episode were, for the most part, pretty fun, even though some of them were just generic standing in a room and Michael was saying this is the time frame we're in, and the only real way we got to see it was a change in the CG outside the window. But on a budget, that's not necessarily the worst thing they could have done. Where it felt slightly more hollow than when Voyager did that is because Discovery hasn't really established all that many alien species monsters of the week one-off events in the same manner as an episodic show like Voyager had, so they can't really throw in, oh, here's the macro virus, here's the telepathic picture plan, here's Chaotica. They can't really throw in these one-off things to call back to prior events. They can only throw in big over-sweeping arcs that Discovery dealt with, like Osira, the Burn, the Red Angel, all that stuff. So that made a lot of sense. They utilized what they could. They just didn't have the definitive history to pull from of an episodic show like Voyager or even TNG when they tried to kind of pull stuff in all good things. What I did like is they were able to bring back some of the actors, primarily, I would have to say, Arium.
You say you're from the future. I am. And you're a Starfleet captain? I'm Discovery's captain.
To give her a little bit more of a send-off. We really never got to know her until they decided to kill her in the first place.
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
But this is the down that really can't be applied to the episode, because this is a down coming from what I wished they did as opposed to what they did do, and that's never really a good thing to do. So what I mean by this is I really wish they had employed more characters from the past. Obviously, I would have loved to see an actual appearance of Jason Isaac as Lorca, or Anson Mount as Pike, or even Philippa Georgiou at one of their time jumps. Heck, I would have loved to see someone like Ash or Nan, even Cornwell, Mudd, or this one really kind of defied logic to me because it should have been there when they went very far in the past. Why wasn't the tardigrade still in that tardigrade cell when they were very early on in Discovery's run? I guess it could have been just slightly after they released it, but that would have been an easy one. They wouldn't have had to get an actor back. They could have just put the CG asset in one of the scenes, had it just, I don't know, flailing around in there, and then we could have had that cool callback. Again, not going to ding the episode for doing that because they didn't know this was actually the last season when they were filming this, so they couldn't have really predicted that this would be the celebratory 5-season mark of Discovery, trying to go back and celebrate all of these different eras by getting returning characters. Maybe we'll see some of them in the future, maybe we'll see some familiar faces, but I just feel like that could have been a more fleshed out way to incorporate each of these eras instead of just saying, well, Lorca and Landry are down on the planet, none of them are here. Now, Landry, I think they could have gotten back a heck of a lot more easily than Jason Isaacs or someone of his stature. Some of these lesser sought-after actors, I guess you could say. But, again, can't really fault them for that. When they jump to the future, I really, really hope this isn't supposed to be that Calypso reference and tie-up they were supposed to be doing this season.
You and the crew died decades ago. Is this a dream?
Because that doesn't even begin to make sense tying it into Calypso. If that is the case, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed. It was nice to see the future and what would result if the Discovery team fails and the Breen will end up getting the progenitor tech from Lockett and Maul and destroying the Federation. Couple of things don't really make a ton of sense there. The technology seems like it's not all that powerful. I don't know. I kind of feel like in order for this chase to make sense, they'll need this technology to be drastically destructive, wherein like it'll just rewrite the fabric of the galaxy, not just kind of destroy technology and leave it floating in space. Again, I digress, but the other part that didn't necessarily make sense is how could Locke and Maul springboard ahead of the Discovery and solve this riddle when the Discovery physically has some of the components on board? How were they able to kind of complete this puzzle if they didn't have all the pieces? Again, I'm thinking too much into it, similar to how the time travel logic doesn't really make all that much sense if you get down and kind of pull on it, but it doesn't really need to. It's just there to kind of complete the picture for this episode. And mostly this episode was to kind of give us a celebration of Discovery's entire run, but also to get Michael and Rayner to come to a better understanding of who each other are. We got to see Rayner interacting with past versions of the crew. Again, had we known and actually seen other versions of the past crew, that might have felt a little bit more genuine, but the ones he does get to see, particularly Reese and very early Michael back in season 1, and I guess it would be just working with Stamets in general. Even though this version of Stamets was from the future like them, having them work together was great. And also, having the little interaction between him and Reno kind of leads to hopefully there's more of them interacting in the future.
Stay safe, steer clear of the bucket heads. And don't worry, we'll get out of this. So will your face.
While we're on the subject of Stamets, even though I just got off it to talk about Reno, one thing I would have liked to be explored a little bit more deeply, or at all, frankly, is they were bouncing around between time periods and he was able to keep his consciousness in the time periods they were in from the future. So we got to see him when he was impaled. Then they skipped to a time frame in the future where the entirety of, I guess, the Federation, Starfleet, humanity, humans, whatever, because of the progenitor tech having fallen into the Breen's hands. I would have liked something to follow up with that, because they even explicitly say,
Here's hoping we land in an era where Stamets isn't dead.
I would have loved them to explore what happened, because if Stamets was retaining his memory and he jumped into a time frame where he was dead, shouldn't there have been some sort of, I don't know, lingering effects from that? He experienced death, he was just a disembodied something, or it was just darkness for that period of time. I don't know. Some exploration of him being in a period of time where he was deceased would have been fascinating. I guess there wasn't really any time to explore that, but they definitively had that as a setup and then didn't pay it off. And they also kind of seem to be teasing that there's something going on with Rayner's hand, because it was now temporarily out of sync and it aged a lot. I definitely think they could cure that. Obviously, when this happened to Chakotay and Shattered, the Doctor was able to cure his temporal aphasia. I don't think that's the right word, but all of his body parts were out of temporal sync, and he was able to very easily cure that. So I would think that Rayner will go back to normal, but it would be very interesting to see him wearing that thing on his hand like David Duchovny had to wear in I almost said Mystery Men. What is that? Zoolander, when he had his hand in the hyperbolic chamber. Don't think they're going to do that, but I would love to see it. A pet peeve of mine when they jumped to the building of Discovery and it was on the surface of the Earth.
We're in dry dock when Discovery was first being built.
That's just something that annoys me. I think it would make a lot more sense for it to be in space, but that's definitely not just something Discovery's done. We've seen that a lot in more modern Star Trek, so I'm going to let it slide. It just slightly annoys me. All in all, I think this episode did a pretty good job of getting across the message it was trying to tell us, and I think our characters kind of developed in the way they were supposed to. Hopefully, we are allowed to springboard forth into that main storyline and just finish out strong. We don't have a heck of a lot of time left in this season, all things considered, and we still have so many mysteries to uncover and characters to learn about, and we have to just wrap up the storyline of the season and the show as a series overall. What are your thoughts? Did you like this episode? Do you like the direction they're going? Do you like the kind of celebratory feel we got for Discovery as a whole here? And where do you think we're going from here? Leave all those thoughts down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all those YouTube things. But until next time...